and Thomas Munford, and they came here from Amelia County, Virginia in about 1801. And they settled this farm, which is now Munfordville, of about 2,500 acres, which they received as a part of a land grant from a woman whose husband had originally owned it, a Frenchman whose husband had originally owned the land grant. And he had received 2,500 acres on the Green River, which is just in this direction. You can see the bridge down there. And the Munford brothers obtained this from her after she was widowed, and they came here and settled.
In the formation of the county itself, what counties did Hart County split off from?
Right. Hart County split off from Hardin County to the north and Barron County to the south.
And I suppose that we look in the background here, of course, behind us is the current courthouse.
That's right.
Do you know when it was built?
The current courthouse was started in 1928. It's the third courthouse which has stood on this square. The first courthouse was torn down sometime in the 1880s or 1890s, I forget which. And the second courthouse, which was a brick structure, which stood exactly where this one stands, burned down the 3rd day of January 1928. And in that we lost almost all our early records of the formation of the county, but except for one deed book.
What about some historical figures that either have come from Hart County or have traveled through here? Can you tell us a little bit about some of them? Are colorful figures?
Well, of course, Hart County, like all counties in Kentucky, is full of colorful figures, both past and present, and I'm sure that the present generation is spinning its own group of colorful characters. It seems like all of these little counties have a lot of very interesting people who do interesting things, and I say that with reference to Todd County and Greene County and Clark County and other counties I've known a little bit about. But the historical figures of significance in Hart County, of course, are the Munford brothers. And then in the Civil War, we had native sons who knew each other who served as generals on separate sides of the war. One was then later General Simon Bolivar Buckner, and General George T. Wood. And both of these men were friends when they were growing up. And General Wood served with the Union Army, and General Buckner served with the Confederate Army. General Buckner later went on to become the governor of Kentucky. In fact, he was running for governor of Kentucky 100 years ago this fall.
I guess that if someone was traveling through Hart County, let's first ask what historical buildings or structures other than the courthouse would someone want to see?
Well, the structures in Munfordville relate primarily to the Civil War, and we have about 10 structures still standing today which were standing then. We have the nurses' quarters, which was our village school, built about 1835. The Presbyterian Church, which was built about 1829, was the hospital during the Civil War. The place where John Hunt Morgan came and conscripted his first 100 volunteers into the Morgan's Raiders is right over one street over. It's called the old McCandless House. Mr. Morgan couldn't find enough Rough Riders in the bluegrass to supply his needs. He needed people who were sort of rough and who were also pro-slavery. So he went up and down the farms along the Green River and recruited his men. And they were a little rougher cut of man than some of the bluegrass gentlemen that Mr. Morgan had been dealing with. And he lived over at the McCandless House for the month of October 1861. And he was sworn into the Confederacy in Hart County on the steps of the Woodsonville Church. He later went from here to form Morgan's Raiders. And today, after the consolidation of our schools in Hart County, our basketball team and football team is known as the Hart County Raiders. So he was, in answer to a previous question of yours, a famous person who came through. Andrew Jackson came through here and stopped at our old inn down here, and it was built about 1801 by Thomas Munford. It was a tavern and an inn, and he opened it in 1801 and kept it open the rest of his life. Jenny Lind is reputed to have stayed there. But I think Jenny Lind stayed at every place in Kentucky from legend. She traveled very slowly through the country.
Another question would be, other than historical sites that one could see if a traveler was traveling through Hart County or this region, what would one see for recreational or vacation atmosphere?
Well, of course, when Hart County was formed, it was a part of the what is now Edmonson County. Part of Edmonson County came off from us, and that part happens to be the location of Mammoth Cave. So we have a portion of Mammoth Cave Park still within the boundaries of Hart County. We have Mammoth Onyx Cave, which is a commercial cave right off the Horse Cave interchange. We have the Hidden River Cave and Horse Cave, which is not open to the public now, but is still, I think, the 10th largest cave system in the world. We have Nolin Lake on our northwestern boundary, which separates Hart and Grayson counties. And we have the Green River, which goes right through the middle of the county and divides it from north to south. And we have a lot of very fine recreational facilities here because of those three attractions.
I would imagine there's probably some pretty good fishing down this territory then.
Yes, sir. Right now is the season when people begin to come in and start their muskie fishing. And we have also a number of creeks where people fish for rainbow trout. This stream, the Green River, because it's cave-fed, is very cold. And because of the coldness of the water, certain fish occur here in the Green River, which actually have their natural habitat very far to the north of us, like the walleye pike and northern pike and some of those species that really are northern fish, but they've made it here because our water is so cold. All right, this building was built about 100 years ago by someone named Chapline. That name is no longer a part of Hart County names, C-H-A-P-L-I-N-E. It was built with a store in the first floor and with two apartments in the upstairs. This building, until very recently, was actually used as a store building. About 10 years ago, the Hart County Historical Society received some money from an estate, and they purchased this building for their historical museum, and it is a very interesting little museum. It's open 5 days a week, and we have a lot of tourists come through here. The most significant development in Hart County in the past 2 years has been the decision in the summer of 1987 of the American Cave Conservation Association to locate its national headquarters in Horse Cave. This house was built about 1835 by the Wood family. Mr. Wood was the first county court clerk for both Hart and Barron counties and served in that capacity for about 60 years. In this house, Simon Bolivar Buckner boarded when he was going to school in Munfordville. He later became a general for the Confederacy, and Mr. Wood's son, George T. Wood, became a general for the Union Army. This old home was built about 1835 by Dr. Lewis Barrett. Dr. Barrett is and was the original doctor for the village of Munfordville, and he lived here all of his life. This home is now occupied by Robert and Doris Clore, who restored it about 10 years ago. This church behind me was built about 1829 to serve as a church for the village of Munfordville. It was built for the use of Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, and Masonic orders. And in the Civil War, this church served as a hospital for the forces who had to stay here. After the 1862 battle, which took place in September 1862, General Grant ordered that Munfordville be occupied. And that occupation lasted until well after the Civil War. As a part of the occupying force, it was necessary to have nurses and carpenters and cooks, and there was a very large tent city on Mr. Munford's farm of Union troops who occupied Munfordville until well after the war. The reason Munfordville was occupied is because just to the west of the city there is a railroad bridge which was vital to the rail link between Louisville and Nashville, and it was the main line for providing supplies to the western front of the Union Army, of which Grant was the commander. The house directly behind me was built in 1823 of log by Thomas J. Munford. As we have said earlier, he was the brother of Richard Munford and Munfordville's original tavern keeper. Thomas Munford's log structure is now under the clapboard structure, which was renovated last year by a local realtor. The structure on the corner was built as the original school in Munfordville in about 1833. It is directly across the street from the Munfordville's original church. This structure served in the Civil War as a nurse's quarters, and until the first decade of the 20th century it served as the only school for the village of Munfordville. After it served as a school, it was later a doctor's office. And after it was a doctor's office, it became an apartment building, and then it passed into being a private home. In about 1965, it became a lawyer's office. And my father and I practiced there until he died, and now this is the place where I practice law in Hart County. The house directly behind me was built in 1837 by F.A.S. Smith. He was a meat packer and had a large meat packing concern at the depot. Hart County is served by, as I said, the main line of the L&N Railroad. In about 1861, John Hunt Morgan boarded here while he got up his first 100 volunteers into Morgan's Raiders. This home later passed into the possession of the McCandless family, and Judge McCandless was later, after being Hart Circuit Judge, the Chief Judge of the Kentucky Court of Appeals. This house was renovated about 3 years ago by a local realtor. I think that you will find a close-knit community in a beautiful part of the state. These hills on each side of the Green River are really a lovely place to be, and it's just a good lifestyle and a good kind of people to work with. I, of course, have lived here all my life, and I don't know what it's like in New York or Hong Kong, but I can tell you that the main thing that Hart County has going for it is its people. And we try hard, and I was asked to say that we also are looking for a good basketball team this year for the Hart County Raiders.
Right. Hodgenville, the county seat of LaRue County. LaRue County population, 12,434. Area square miles, 263. Rank, 78th. LaRue County is located in the 2nd Congressional District.
My name is Iris LaRue, and I'm with the Chamber of Commerce here in LaRue County.
And I'm Tommy Turner, LaRue County Judge Executive.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to get some information on the formation of the county.
Well, back in 1818, Robert Hodgen, who was the town father, got permission to incorporate and founded Hodgenville, based around his home place, which was about 20 acres. He had a small inn there where many travelers stayed, including Louis Philippe, who became later one of the French kings. And also the Hodgens operated a grist mill there, where people took their wheat to have it ground into flour, and it became a very flourishing little spot here in the county. All right. Lincoln was born in LaRue County, what was at that time Hardin County, on February 12, 1809, just about 3 miles south from where we stand right now. He was born in a one-room log cabin, and it's rather interesting that the daughter, Rebecca, she was the daughter of Robert Hodgen, is said to have assisted at Lincoln's birth. Lincoln and his sister Sarah and mother and father lived at the Sinking Spring Farm for about 2 years. And that farm is now known the world over as Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historic Site. It is owned and operated by the National Park Service.